The following video is a re-edit of my Clerks and Me video, which was originally uploaded on May 17th of 2023. As with all the edits that I've done, I put it over my pink background and, made it kind of more in line with my more recent videos, and I made a few adjustments to my use of Clerks 3 to be more compliant with YouTube's rules on copyright. So with that being said, enjoy the video. In 1994, a low-budget black-and-white comedy film named Clerks was released. The movie was directed by Kevin Smith and presented a Seinfeld-esque humor-through-dialogue style of storytelling. The movie was shot in New Jersey. It starred Brian O'Halloran as Dante Hicks, clerk at a local corner store who gets called in to cover a shift on his day off, and as a result of every event going completely off the rails, by the end of the movie his life is completely ruined. All because
I'm not even supposed to be here today!
Oh, fuck you!
Clerks introduced us to the classic Kevin Smith characters such as Randall Graves, his best friend who's played by Jeff Anderson, as well as Jay and Silent Bob, who would become the mascot characters for all of Kevin Smith's future movies, and would be an element to tie together his shared universe of comedies. Like, everything about this movie is great. The character moments, the humor, and just how cozy this movie feels despite being pretty off the walls. It's essentially set in a bottle, which is the quick stop convenience store, as well as the video store next to it, the sidewalk, and the roof, just all these little places around it, but it's still technically a bottle. It's one of the few comedy movies I genuinely can watch repeatedly. There's just something so good about this movie. It really did shape a part of my sense of humor in my formative years. Just being around Dante and Randall for this movie and listening into their conversations. It's like when you have two friends making inside jokes while talking to each other, and they seem to be enjoying the conversation, but instead of being left out of it like it would be in that situation, you're completely in on it and you're able to enjoy it behind the fourth wall. Dante is the main protagonist and, everything bad happens to him, but he's not particularly a good person, so it's kind of well deserved. He sneaks around behind his girlfriend's back when his ex comes to town, and part of the movie has him pretty much about to leave his current girlfriend, who's really good to him, just to chase the one that always treated him like garbage. The whole situation blowing up in his face is great because you have absolutely zero sympathy for him despite the fact that you've been following him throughout the whole movie. It's a very special film. Clerks was a movie that I discovered when I was 13, 14. I had seen other Jay and Silent Bob movies. I knew who Jay and Silent Bob were, I knew who Kevin Smith was, but I'd never seen Clerks. I remember other kids not watching it because they'd be like, oh man, it's in black and white, as if that was a bad thing. Maybe when you're at that age, you can't process style choices, I don't know. And looking at it, yeah, I can kind of get why some 10 to 12-year-olds might not be as into Clerks as, say, Dogma or Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back or even Mallrats, because when you're at a young age, you don't process comedy as well. You don't really intake it as well as you would maybe when you're a teenager. Every bit of humor has to be in your face, like physical gags, dirty language, just stuff that's like in your face funny is what you go for. So the more subtle dialogue contained in Clerks might have been unappealing to a bunch of 10 to 12-year-olds. Nevertheless, when I was 13, 14, I was at my cousin's house and, had a bunch of VHS tapes and, rather than go on LimeWire and give their computer AIDS watching Dragon Ball Z anime videos or porn, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna watch a film today. And I saw Clerks. I'm like, oh, I've heard about Clerks. It's that Jay and Silent Bob movie. So I put it in and I honestly fell in love with it. It had this lasting effect on me in my formative years. This was when I was in the age where I was obsessed with Clerks, CKY, and Family Guy. Clerks to this day remains as one of my all-time favorite movies, and despite what I'm going to say about the sequels and what I'm going to say about Kevin Smith as a filmmaker, this movie will always have a special place in my heart. Clerks was a major success in theaters, and it launched the career of director Kevin Smith. The movie was made on a budget of under $300,000, most of which was done for post-effects to make the movie black and white, and it made $4.4 million at the box office, which resulted in Kevin Smith getting greenlit for more projects through Miramax. After Clerks came Mallrats, which was even more successful, but to be honest, honest, Mallrats doesn't do the same thing for me that Clerks does. It's a testament to my belief that giving a director like Kevin Smith a bigger budget does not really benefit the product. It doesn't guarantee a better movie. Nevertheless, Mallrats was successful and helped launch many careers. Kevin Smith would continue to do movies such as Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, etc. Some of these movies started to kind of drift away from what made Clerks so funny, opting to go for less clever banter and more full-on raunchy jokes with comic book and Star Wars references crammed in. And to be honest, the whole plot of Chasing Amy really does not hold up today and is in very poor taste. Don't even get me started on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But honestly, Dogma's alright. But when I think of Clerks being my favorite movie, it's not because of Jay and Silent Bob. I find Jay and Silent Bob actually damage the quality of many films they're in because they're just simply not funny. They're kind of annoying. As the years went on, Kevin Smith exercised every option. He lost the chance to do a Superman movie, and he failed to turn Clerks into a successful animated series, which admittedly, I like the cartoon. I'm gonna get to that later on. After all this, Kevin Smith decided after 10 plus years to do a follow-up to Clerks, aptly titled Clerks 2. So yeah, I have an interesting history with Clerks 2. I don't like Clerks 2. Right away, I just want to say the decision to lift the characters of Dante and Randall from the Quick Stop and place them in a fast food restaurant, aka Movies, which is a fictional chain within the universe of these movies, was a huge misstep. Now, I don't like this movie. It doesn't mean it's completely devoid of humorous moments. I think the opening where the Quick Stop burns down is pretty funny, just because at this point in time, Dante and Randall's actors could still play Dante and Randall pretty well. In fact, as I go through both Clerks 2 and 3, I'm not gonna so much blame the actors, well maybe a little bit for Clerks 3, I'm gonna be blaming the writers. But basically, all Clerks 2 is a movie that uses the title Clerks, puts Dante and Randall in a new setting with some new characters, and then proceeds to completely miss the entire point of Clerks. The first Clerks had its share of adult-themed conversations and raunchy situations, but they were contextualized very well, and the characters were 20-something-year-olds, so they weren't very mature, so it made sense for them to act the way they acted. It took place after Randall and Dante were in high school, and everybody's a fucking teenager until their mid to late 20s. The nerd culture stuff was in Clerks, but it didn't dominate the discussions, instead opting for more lore and world building with the two characters. The situations that happen are over the top, but plausible. Clerks 2 loses all the charm that was found in Clerks 1. Instead of the more low-key Seinfeldian humor through dialogue, we get just an obnoxious movie filled with vulgarity without reason, and just obnoxious conversations that attempt to emulate the feel of the first movie, but fails in every conceivable way. It's like Clerks 1 seemed like a coming-of-age story, but subverts itself because nobody really comes of age. Nobody learns a fucking lesson, and that's the end of the movie. Clerks 2 tries to do that as well, with the characters being in their 30s, and it just does not work, like, whatsoever. Dante in the first movie starts off as a sympathetic and likable character. You're like, oh, I've had moments like that where I've been called in on my day off, and it sucks, but as the movie goes on, you see the decisions he makes, and you stop feeling sorry for him and start enjoying watching his life fall apart. And I want to re-elaborate on this. Yeah, you have no sympathy for Dante, but you can't empathize with him because, you know, when you're 20, you don't make the smartest of decisions. Clearly, Dante has not gotten over his relationship with Caitlin, and furthermore, he romanticizes it despite the fact that it is said that she's cheated on him multiple times and has treated him like complete garbage. I'm guessing this is a decision that he's making based on the fact that he's currently unsatisfied with his current day life, and he is more satisfied with when he was a teenager, so he thinks he can kind of regain some of that by going back with Caitlin. Problem is, he's doing it behind his current girlfriend Veronica's back, and he's not doing it out of malice towards her, so it makes it a little less bad. Like, if he was like, oh, fuck that fucking bitch, that would be bad, but no, he's just kind of doing it. So despite not being a sympathetic character, the audience can empathize with him. I think everybody's had a moment in their 20s where they're like, oh, fuck, man, I wish I could go back, like, back to when I was a teenager, but unfortunately, time is meant to go forward. There is no going back. The past is the past, the future is the future. The problem is, Dante has every chance in the world to fix his life. He could go back to college, he could do whatever. Veronica's trying to encourage him to better himself, but he himself is so stubborn and stuck in his ways that he doesn't want to do it. In his own words,
my mother told me once that when I was 3 years old, my potty lid was closed. And instead of me lifting it, I shit my pants.
Lovely story.
The point is, I'm not the type of person who'll disrupt things just so I can shit comfortably.
So in the context of a story about a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, yeah, this works perfectly. So yeah, with this age group, this story works. Yeah, Dante is doing some really bad things, but like, I'm hard stuck on whether he's just a bad person or if he's just so desperate to go back that he doesn't care whose feelings he hurts. You notice how a lot of what I'm saying is regarding the story arc? Like, yeah, the movie's really funny, but this movie wasn't great because of its jokes. The jokes merely supplemented what was a very well-written and relatable story. I don't know what happened to Kevin Smith. He just kind of stopped doing this, and then he just kind of went all in on the humor. And right there, I have found the root fucking cause of Kevin Smith's movie career going fucking down the shitter. Because without the context of the story, these jokes aren't really all that funny. They play off each other, they supplement each other, it's a synergy. You can't just have one without the other. I don't want to solely place the blame for Clerks 2 not being satisfactory to me on the fact that the actors were older, because they can't help that. And because there are way more complaints I can make. It's like Kevin Smith wanted to kind of recapture Clerks 1, but he also wanted to make the movie more like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is, that's not gonna work. What made the humor in Clerks work so well is, while some of it was outrageous, it was all around downplayed, it was low-key, it was subtle. Only really going all out near the climax of the film, like Caitlin fucking a dead corpse is fucking hilarious, and it's a good payoff to a really something you forget about from earlier in the movie. What I see in Clerks 1, I see a good plot and some pretty genius jokes.
I can't fucking believe you.
I'm telling you, it wasn't my fault.
You knocked the casket over, for Christ's sake.
I was just leaning on it. It was an accident.
Like someone knocks a casket over on purpose?
So the casket fell over. Big deal.
Her fucking body fell out.
Clerks 2 doesn't really have it. Randall was the comic relief character in the first movie. He's the funniest one. And Dante, while he wasn't as funny, he was okay to take the lead. You were okay with following him throughout the movie, which they kind of fail to do in Clerks 2, because in Clerks 2, Dante is a piece of fucking cardboard. He's really boring. Like, his whole story arc is just kind of lame. Like, he's engaged, but he's cheating again. He wants to move away, but he doesn't, and that's the end of the movie. And then there's Jay and Silent Bob, who are just really annoying. This is coming off of, like, when they got really popular. This is the first movie after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back to feature them, and they eat up way more screen time than they did in the first Clerks, and it's annoying. And then there's the Elias character. I don't know what Kevin Smith was going for with the Elias character, but it did not land. The only slight saving grace for Clerks 2 is the character of Randall, and he's not great, you know, he's not as good as he was in the first movie, but Jeff Anderson still knew how to work the character. And in comparison to the rest of the movie, he does manage to get a few laughs out of me, because he's still a fucking asshole, but it's played up pretty heavily, and sometimes it goes a little too far. Like, in the first movie, yeah, he's socially inept, but he wouldn't go around using racial slurs.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
What? What's the big deal? Since when is it a crime to say porch monkey?
Oh, I don't know. Since forever?
Why?
Because porch monkey's a racial slur against black people.
No, it's not.
Randall!
And I don't know, you want to see how much time has passed between 2006 and 2023? There's this whole thing where he talks about banging teenagers, and this used to be like an oh haha funny thing, and now it's just pretty fucking gross and not all that funny, especially when you consider the relationship between Kevin Smith and Harvey Weinstein. You know, I actually want to elaborate on this a little bit more. It is fucking weird how it went from like, oh, 30-year-old guy banging teenagers, haha, to like it being disgusting. And believe me, I think it is pretty fucking disgusting for somebody in their 30s to be fooling around with a high school girl, even if she is 18. Just because it's legal does not mean it's ethical. And I get that the joke is that Randall is supposed to be immature, but it's just fucking weird. And it's like, I knew fucking people in their like late 20s and 30s that were fooling around with high school girls when I was in high school, and it's just fucking weird and uncomfortable, and it's not something that should really be played for laughs. I just know there's gonna be somebody in the comments, well, it's cancel culture, it was a different time, cancel culture, like, it was funny, it's just a joke, take a joke, snowflake. It's like, okay, it's not funny because it's just fucking gross, and it's something that actually happens in real life. They essentially took Randall, one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and turned him into a fucking sex pest. really don't know what they were going for here. It's like in Alien 3 when the fucking warden tells Ripley that all the inmates are murderers, rapists, and child molesters, and it's like, well, I can't be sympathetic towards these characters anymore. I get that Randall's supposed to be a bad person, but like, it doesn't have to be a fucking straight up fucking sex weirdo. A lot less funny when you get older and you remember, oh yeah, that chick that was banging a 30-year-old, what's she up to right now? Oh, she's really fucked up. And yeah, you might think it was unfair of me to compare Kevin Smith to Harvey Weinstein and use that relationship as the basis for some of this fucking weird humor, but all I have to say is I'm gonna post this clip from The Thing. Clerks 2 shed off the more witty banter moments for more disgusting gross-out jokes and nerd culture references. Like, the whole movie ends with them watching a guy fuck a horse, and then with a forced sentimental conversation between Dante and Randall. I think what bothers me the most about the depiction of these two as best friends is it kind of kills the dynamic the two had in the first movie. Like, I always got the idea that the two were friends, but it was like at most a casual friendship thing or workplace type deal. Like, yeah, they play hockey together, but it always felt to me like they didn't really hang out much outside of work, and that most of the interactions they have are just because Randall doesn't like working and uses bugging Dante at the quick stop as an excuse to get away from the video store. Like, I could picture Randall doing the exact same shit he does with Dante with one of the other quick stop employees. In fact, that would have been like an interesting episode of the animated series had it lasted more than 6 episodes. But this kind of retcon into making them heterosexual life partners just kind of seems like they wanted to shoehorn in an emotional moment, and meh. And of course, Jay and Silent Bob are even more annoying. They try to rerun the Dante love triangle dynamic, but this time they kind of reverse it. Like, whereas Veronica was really good to him, and Dante chasing Caitlin makes him look like an asshole, and makes us satisfied when in the end he ends up with neither of them. You know, this movie decides that his fiance, you know, isn't exactly bad to him. So then we find out he's banging Rosario Dawson. It's like, I don't know, it just makes Dante look like even worse of an asshole, but at least in the first movie, he has the excuse that he never got over his high school sweetheart and is not at a mature level of thinking. Here it's like, bro, you just started banging Rosario Dawson behind your fiance's back. And granted, Rosario Dawson is much more attractive than Kevin Smith's wife, but like, I don't know, man. Anytime Kevin Smith tries to do a romance thing, it seems like he has the same understanding of romance that a 14, 15-year-old has. I guess maybe in his own way he didn't mature, but I hate this movie. This movie is just not likable. There's no charm to it. It feels soulless. The characters don't have anything resembling what they had in the first movie. Hell, the short cameo they had in Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back captured their characters better than this, and the cartoon was better at capturing the feel of the movie despite being a fucking cartoon. My actual story with Clerks 2 is actually funnier to me than the movie Clerks 2. It was the summer of grade 9, Canada Day 2006. Myself and my friend Andrew were hanging out. We hadn't really hung out much since high school started because we both had different shit going on, but we decided to hang out for Canada Day, and we hung out with these girls we knew from middle school. We smoked a joint. I think it was my first or second time smoking weed. We watched the fireworks, whatever. We didn't figure out how to find parties or get booze, so we just kind of went back to his house without the girls because we were weird and they didn't really like us that way anyway, and we were stoned, and his brother was watching a bootleg copy of Clerks 2, which had just come out shortly before Canada Day. So let me tell you something, being high and not laughing once at this movie, like, I didn't smoke weed often back then, I still don't, but it really hurt my soul seeing a sequel to one of my favorite movies of all time, and not even marijuana could make me enjoy it. As soon as it ended, I think the first words out of my mouth were like, man, that fucking sucked. It's weird because later on I kind of gaslit myself into liking it. It's not like 100% devoid of humor, it's like 95% devoid of humor. It has like a few funny moments, and I kind of went easier on it later until I just totally did a 360 and went back to absolutely despising this fucking movie. This movie actually damaged my perception of Clerks 1 because it was such a poor follow-up, and I only recently have been able to put that out of my head when enjoying the first movie. I hate this movie that much. Like, to put this into perspective, there was a point in time where the original Clerks was absolutely my #1 undisputed favorite comedy movie of all time. But because of Clerks 2 and Kevin Smith's other works, it's kind of been knocked down a bit. And what is my #1 favorite comedy movie of all time, you may ask? It's Napoleon Napoleon Dynamite. Following Clerks 2, Kevin Smith would continue to do movies. His last movie that was really any good was Zack and Miri Make a Porno, but every movie he did following that just deteriorated in quality. Smith always had this weird obsession with Canada, and as a Canadian, I think there's nothing I hate more than an American who is obsessed with Canada. He made that god-awful Tusk movie, which was just like an attempted cash-in on that human centipede shock horror genre, and then he did Yoga Hosers, which I don't even know what the fuck that movie is, and it fucking bothers me. And then he did Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which I didn't watch, and I will never watch, but I have heard some very choice things about that movie, mainly that it's like the worst movie ever made, in the opinion of some people. It's pretty sad that Kevin Smith's fucking skills as a filmmaker have deteriorated so badly that at this point in time, his movies don't even resemble the bad Kevin Smith movies, let alone the comedic genius of Clerks. In recent years, in a similar way to how in Clerks 2, Kevin Smith really tried to display how hot his wife is, and she's like, okay, his recent movies have been an attempt to show off how talented his daughter is, with him consistently using her. And she isn't particularly good at acting, nor is she funny. She's just another Nepo baby. She's a charisma black hole who, if not for her father, would be working in a fucking restaurant right now. Oh, and he had some weird relationship with Johnny Depp in this awful straight-to-streaming movies that he does, like Tusk and Yoga Hosers. And I look at this and I see that Johnny Depp, the man who is in like critically acclaimed movies, is doing straight-to-streaming Kevin Smith movies. And I'm like, oh, no wonder Amber Heard shit in his bed, because I'd be pretty fucking upset too if I'd seen my husband was doing these. You know, it's kind of funny though, because like Kevin Smith loves Canada, and he made these two movies, Tusk and Yoga Hosers, take place in Canada, and then he doesn't use like any Canadian actors. It's almost as if Kevin Smith is just a big fucking hack. So after making 3 movies that were critically eviscerated, Kevin Smith decided to finally do Clerks 3, a movie that he had apparently brought up not that long after Clerks 2. While Clerks 2 was a box office and critical success, Kevin Smith abruptly decided to stop doing movies in the View Askew universe. Only Zack and Miri was retroactively added to that universe recently. So after doing the god-awful Tusk and Yoga Hosers and Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, he finally, after 20 years since Clerks 2, I'm fucking old, decided to start producing Clerks 3.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
I had absolutely zero expectations for Clerks 3. With how bad Kevin Smith's movies had gotten, I was expecting this to be like the worst movie ever made. Like, the man cries on camera over superhero movies and makes bad movies, he should be shot into the sun. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this out of the way, because this may shock you. Nah, this movie fucking sucked. It was less abrasive than Clerks 2, but it just did not feel like Clerks at all. It felt like Kevin Smith had some sort of weird passion project going on here, with the heart attacks being prevalent. It's obvious he was inspired by his own heart attack, which he suffered a few years ago, and, you know, fucking he made Clerks 3, which has Randall suffer a heart attack, and decided to make a movie based on his life. The movie is basically a whole bunch of callback moments and stuff, with them recreating moments from the original Clerks. Characters show back up, and the joke is, oh, they're old now. The video store is now a weed dispensary, because of course it is, but there's a weird thing where Jay and Silent Bob still try to act like they're dealing outside, which this personally doesn't land for me. In fact, I am so sick of these two characters in this movie already, and it literally just started. You got Jason Mewes with the most unconvincing false teeth I've ever seen. He looks like fucking Bart Simpson when he stole Grandpa's teeth. The movie desperately tries to be funny, but in doing so, it misses what made the original film so great, which is ironic because of the amount of references to the first movie you see in here and the recreations of scenes from the first movie. I do like that they actually got back as many actors from the original as possible, who were all just local people from this small town in New Jersey, but there's a lot of meta moments clearly based on Kevin Smith's experiences making the first movie, which, why didn't he just do a movie based on the making of Clerks? Oh wait, there is one. It's called Shooting Clerks. He had very little to do with it. There's a lot of questionable decisions made in this movie. For one, making Randall the center. Randall in the first movie was a secondary protagonist. He was a supporting character, but the movie was Dante's story, which I think this movie is trying to suggest the same thing, because throughout the movie, Randall makes it all about himself. I'm guessing this is some sort of meta pushback thing, like Kevin Smith knows that fans love Randall and that he's extremely popular, and that he often steals the show in every movie he's in, to the point that people forget that this is Dante's story and talk only about Randall. But still, a movie about Randall would have been great in the day, just not this movie. So at the end of Clerks 2, Dante ends up with the Rosario Dawson character, Becky, but they reveal in this one that she died shortly after the events of Clerks 2, and Dante has been dealing with the grief ever since. This plays into his story arc, and while it seems like they're really forcing emotional moments for this movie, I'll give Brian O'Halloran credit. He really did put in the work to do these emotional scenes, but it's just not appropriate given the fact that this is post-THC senility Kevin Smith, which I heard Kevin Smith quit weed. Good for him, hopefully he sticks to it. The most positive thing I can say about Clerks 3 is it oddly enough feels closer to 1 than 2 did, and that's like not saying much. Like 2 I look at and think, you know, he could have done this movie with brand new characters and it could have just been a fast food version of Clerks. But then I remember, oh right, the movie Waiting did that a lot better than Kevin Smith could ever dream of doing. But this has sort of that kind of contained, cozy feeling, not too much, it's still a bad movie, but it has a beginning, middle, and end, and it does pay tribute to Clerks. It's just Kevin Smith ain't got it no more. It feels flat, it's not really fun or funny, and it seems like parts of the movie are missing, or Kevin Smith was just so stoned that he forgot to write them in. I won't use the term mess to describe this movie, but it definitely suffers from pacing issues. It's as if Kevin Smith was trying to not make it like his later movies, but he forgot to make it like Clerks or even Mallrats. So the movie just keeps going on, with Randall becoming excessively selfish while making the movie because he makes it all about him. And then like there's a scene where Veronica from the first movie shows up and she's looking pretty rough, but she's in her 60s, that's just the way it is. And they keep recreating these scenes until it's time to film the Clerks 2 portion, where Dante has a breakdown and is unable to film because he doesn't want to go back into the movies. And it's like, I don't know man, they're really dragging this thing along where he's still fucked up from his wife's death, and like this would have worked if the movie was made even like 5 years ago, but I don't know, like 20 years almost is like, that's a long time to really process your grief and get some therapy or whatever. But either way, this results in Dante getting drunk and him and Randall getting into this huge fight while filming the whole salsa shark scene. And this is the best part of the movie because after years of abuse and mistreatment from Randall making the movie about himself is the final straw, and Dante just gives it to him and everybody looks on, and actually the reactions are like pretty good. Like even Jay's false teeth are shocked by this. And then, you know, Dante collapses from a heart attack, just like Randall earlier, having ignored the doctor's advice to get himself checked. And Randall has seen the error of his ways and recuts the film and sneaks into the hospital. I'll say the speech he gives Dante is pretty nice, but then it goes into this moment that I honestly think is a little bit overkill, because basically Dante envisions himself in a movie theater watching his own life. His ex-wife comes in and gets him, and then they go to the afterlife. So yeah, they decided to just go all in on a downer ending by killing off Dante. And I don't know how to feel about this part. Like on the one hand, it plays off how Dante was supposed to be killed at the end of the first movie, something they even reference in this movie, but on the other hand, it seems like Kevin Smith trying to force emotional content into the movie in an inappropriate fashion. Like, did they just want to kill any prospect of ever using these characters again? Like, you can do that without making it a downer ending. Did he get badgered for a Clerks 3 so much that he said, fine, but I'm gonna do it this way, you know, so that there will never be a Clerks 4? I don't know, maybe it's them telling us to get over Clerks 1, because I know I'm not the only person who thinks Clerks 1 is his best movie. But it ends in such an over-dramatic way that comes out of left field that it kind of just muddles the whole thing, and I kind of hate it. It really drags the movie down, because like, the movie wasn't really funny, but it was lighthearted up to this point. It's just like a mood backlash. It's just it's too much, and not in the sad way. So it all wraps itself up with a funeral, and it returns to the quick stop where Dante's ex-fiance from the first movie shows up, having loaned Dante 30 grand to make Randall's movie while putting his half of the store up as collateral. And, you know, she comes in to call in her half of the store, only for Elias, who I didn't talk about throughout this movie because I hate this character, to come in and say his crypto thing took off. Because remember when crypto was a big deal like less than a year ago, and then just like everybody stopped caring, everybody just fucking didn't give a shit? And then the movie abruptly ends with a half-cooked reference to the cartoon.
Well played, Clerks.
And it ends with Randall next to Dante's ghost looking over the store, and I'm glad this movie was just mercifully short. I could forgive Clerks 3 for being just like over the top and being a clear passion project if it just wasn't so flat. it doesn't deliver what, like, people really wanted, including myself, from a Clerks follow-up. And while I applaud Kevin Smith for trying to go back to his roots, what we get is just a lame attempt at being somber and doing an end of the Wild West type story. I think I only laughed like once or twice at this movie, mostly because of Randall, but really because of Jay's false teeth. And it felt like I could have just watched literally anything else. In fact, I watched the Ted Raimi movie Skinner after this to just wash the fucking taste out of my mouth. Kevin Smith said this would be his last movie, and that turned out to be a lie. But this movie almost didn't happen because Jeff Anderson, who played Randall, did not want to do it. He'd retired from acting. But either way, Kevin Smith is now doing some movie called Moose Jaws, and it's rumored Mallrats 2 is in the works, but I have no interest in neither of those. Kevin Smith is an example of a director who lost his way pretty early on, and he's just never able to recreate his first two movies on an artistic level, and while he was initially successful, this did not last. Clerks 3 was closure to his View Askew universe, and despite me actually thinking it's a better movie than Clerks 2, at least on a structural basis, it's still not very good. There's some creative choices I question, and I like the overuse of licensed music, including Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, which that doesn't fit. It doesn't fit Clerks. Not only is the song more from my generation, it's like emo and it's overplayed anyway, and it does not fit a story that originated in the 90s. You'd think he'd use some era-appropriate music. Like, yeah, it takes place in the modern day, but MCR isn't exactly the modern day. For some reason, he decided to dip into my generation. I'm guessing he's somewhat aware that my generation is really into his movies, or was, and besides that, there's a lot of other licensed music he uses, and it feels like really inappropriate, and I counted like 16 uses of licensed music. And I addressed this before, but I'm gonna say it again. The Elias character is not fucking funny, and they used him way too much in this movie, and he's fucking just like, ugh. Like, I started looking at my phone whenever he was on the screen, because I knew I wasn't gonna miss anything funny. And let me tell you, I spent a lot of time on my phone during this movie because he was fucking everywhere. He has like screen time equal to Dante and Randall. And you know what, while I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. For a movie that hinges on being a nostalgia show for the first movie as well as for the other movies in the shared universe in general, it seems to willfully shy away from one of the biggest plot points in the first movie and one of the biggest parts of Dante's story, which is Caitlin Bree. She only really gets a small offhand mention here, and yeah, her actual actress passed away a few years ago from cancer or an overdose, I think, but she had cancer. It's really sad. And the movie pays an in memoriam to her, but they really shy away from referencing her in the story, even omitting her from Dante's life flashing before his eyes, which if you look at the movie, the first movie, and the cartoon, she was a really big part of his life, and that just kind of bugs me on a certain level. I also feel I should note that this movie is actually partially adapted from a script Smith wrote in the 2000s titled Clerks Sell Out, which was to be an animated movie. And there was an entirely different version of Clerks 3 written that involved Dante raising his deaf daughter, a weird thing about a Ranger Danger movie premiere, which would have ended with Dante revealing he had severe cancer before getting killed in a mass shooting. Jeff Anderson outright refused to return for the role, but honestly, with the potential of Clerks and the View Askew universe, there were a lot of ways they could have done Clerks 3. Hell, I could probably just bang one out now. So in the tradition of O.J. Simpson, this is my personal if I did it. Personally, if I did it, I think the movie should have kept the Rosario Dawson character alive, and the whole movie would have been centered around Dante finding out that Caitlin Bree passed away and him processing it. They should have scrapped the whole nostalgia show thing, they should have scrapped the whole Dante dying thing, and given us a movie where Dante learns that she passed away, and he and Randall end up going on a road trip to her funeral. And the whole thing takes place in a car, which is a framing device for an anthology type movie depicting stories of them when they were younger. Stories that give context to Dante's relationship with Caitlin, as well as how they ended up working as clerks at the store, and just all sorts of funny little things, like, because Kevin Smith was really good at doing these funny little stories, but he did them through dialogue. It would actually be nice to see these stories be given a visual aid as an anthology format, which is framed by this whole road trip to Caitlin's funeral. Like, cast younger actors to play all the characters in high school and do a period piece dramedy, and then have Dante constantly romanticize his relationships with Caitlin, the ones that were extremely toxic, that caused him to destroy a relationship before, and then just do sort of a thing where he starts to slowly realize that she treated him like shit for the first time in his life. Because they never really gave closure to that whole thing in Clerks 1. She just fucks a dead guy and gets hauled off to a nut house. And then he kind of realizes that he treated Veronica like shit, but it's too late. So it's like they could have had a whole thing where, you know, he's in the car and he starts to slowly realize it, and then they get to the funeral, and you think he goes up to the stand, you're like, okay, okay, he's gonna say something nice, and then he just like fucking shits on her in front of her like friends and family, calls her every name in the book, and then it could end in one of two ways. Number one, it ends with a mirror of the funeral scene from Clerks 1 where he and Randall get chased out of the funeral. Or number two, it ends with every single person in the funeral just completely getting in on it. And I know this would be kind of in bad taste because the woman who played Caitlin passed away, so ending one is probably a lot better, but it would have at least given Dante some character growth rather than just keep him the way he was, and maybe just giving some closure to what was the biggest fucking plot point of the first movie. I just came up with a better Clerks 3 in one fucking paragraph that I pulled out of my ass than both the unmade and produced Clerks 3 movies. If you want a good sequel to Clerks, watch the animated series. Yeah, it gets ridiculous, it is a cartoon, but I feel even by making the show extremely cartoony and over the top, it captures the feel of Clerks better than 2 or 3 could ever dream of. It's sad to admit, but sometimes these two sequels and the rest of Kevin Smith's movies as a whole make me question how much I really like Clerks and how good of a movie it is. Am I looking at it with an air of nostalgia? I find a lot of people from my generation who like Kevin Smith's movies seem to have a sort of nostalgia glasses problem. Is Clerks truly his one magnum opus, or am I looking at it with rose-tinted glasses because it was a movie that I experienced in my formative years? Are there people who look at Clerks and think it's okay, but think Mallrats is this great movie and then have the same opinion on the rest of Kevin Smith's movies that I do? I don't know. I'm still on the boat that Clerks had something special that Kevin Smith just was never able to recreate, and that he drifted farther and farther from it with every film he made afterwards. You don't have any idea how much this bothers me, the fact that I really like Clerks, but I think Kevin Smith's movies range from mid to bad. I don't know if it was just the fame, the money, or the weed getting to his head, but it's sad that we just never got to see this side of Kevin Smith again. But maybe we never needed to. Maybe all we ever needed was Clerks. For years I wanted Kevin Smith to try and make another movie that I liked as much as Clerks. I've insulted Kevin Smith on Twitter. I've constantly shit on every movie with his name on it when people bring them up. I purposely ruin the fun of others who enjoy his other movies because of my desire to see another movie that captured Clerks, knowing full well that that can never happen, no matter how much I wanted to. So I'll have to learn to live with it. Because I can live with it. I can live with it.
Computer, erase that entire personal log.
That was my supersized look at the Clerks trilogy and my thoughts on Kevin Smith's other works. Sorry if you like Kevin Smith, but to me he's just a fucking 30-year-long disappointment. Join me next time when I don't know, more Trailer Park Boys, more Simpsons, Child of the Jackass Generation. I really haven't planned this far, but whatever. This whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth, so I'm definitely gonna be doing something I have a much more positive view on. Like, subscribe, leave fucking hate comments, bye.
Are you sure there was someone back there?
Well, I didn't just fuck myself! Jesus Christ! God, I'm gonna be sick.
You just fucked a total stranger?
Shut the fuck
I
up.
can't believe this.
Call the police.
No, don't!
Because there's a stranger in our bathroom, he just raped Caitlin.
She said she did all the
Will you
work.
shut the fuck up?